is the distance. Time, what does that mean? Distance. Time is the distance. Time is the distance. Where did it go? Time is the distance, just as the moment of the point is, no, not that. And since time is the distance separating events in order of succession. So time is the distance, that is spatial figure, or a spatial concept. So if something happens, let's say, let's try to think it through. So the event 1, okay, E1. Here, what is event 1? Niche. I start walking, for example. And then E2, I start traverse this distance. Okay, that's a spatial distance. And then I sort of turn right. That's E3. So these are 3 events. Like, so let's say this happened at 10:05. This happened at 10:10. This happened at 10:15. Okay. So there are 2 types of distance according to this conception. This distance D1 and this distance D2. So this distance is D1 plus D2 is spatial distance, obviously. So let's give it a horizontal axis, and time is this. But there's another distance we are traversing, which is the distance in, and since time is the distance separates, so that's also a distance separates. So distance between 10:05 and 10:10 and 10:15. And this distance is, let's say, T1, T2, and T3. That distance is perpendicular to this distance. And so this distance, the D1, D2 is the distance within a space, and since time is the distance separating events in order of succession and binding them in different holes, and since time is the distance, and time can also be conceived as the distance, or the distance which is perpendicular to distance which we are traversing in spatial realm. So, and this distance is a distance in order of succession. So that's distance. So this happened first, this happened second, and this happened third. So we can think of this as a distance, but distance in time is the distance separating events in a different dimension, or different dimension to the distance traversed, especially. So we can plot it on y-axis. But what does it solve our problem? What's the relationship between these 2 types of distances? That's the thing. As a new dimension in this distance. So one thing which is clear, that even if we take time on the model of, or image of space, and treat it as a distance, it's a different type of distance. And it can only be plotted in a different axis. But one thing is clear even now, is that even if we are talking about them as distances in different axes, so that's time, that's space, still we can say that the difference between temporal distance and spatial distance in this conception, that is, Ouspensky's conception as described by Allama Iqbal, is not difference of a kind, I think, because you're still treating as a figure, as a concept, in analogy with spatial distance. Or at least you are, or more precisely, you are fashioning your concepts or you are understanding time on the basis of your understanding of space. Yeah, that's more accurate, I guess. Okay, but he goes on to say that the new dimension, it is incommensurable it is incommensurable with the dimension of three-dimensional space. So, and he gives the example of a year is a distance in time, and St. Petersburg, that's a place, that's a special three-dimensional figure. Both are dimensions. What these dimensions are, they don't have a, we can't, they don't have any, we can't understand them or we can't measure them. They're incommensurable, that in the sense that they can't be understood or measured according to the same, or according to a single criterion. Even if you're saying that they are incommensurable, but we're actually understanding both of them as some sort of spatial figures, but spatial figures in an incommensurable way, in the sense that one is perpendicular to the other. So both are distances, but one in a totally different dimension than the other. So we can understand time as a distance, as long as we remember that this distance is not through space, but through another dimension, which is space-like, since we are talking about distance, but only in name, in a way. Because when we talk about incommensurability, what are we talking about? Like, if you look at it in literal terms. So literally not to be judged by the same standard. So we can't judge, we can't understand time and space by the same standards, even though we are using the similar concept, like the concept of distance. So incommensurable is having no common standards of measurement. We measure space in feet or meter, and we measure time in hours and years. So both are distances, but totally different types of distances. I think we understand this a bit more clearly, but it doesn't take as much forward in understanding, I think. Okay, what else he says? So, as a new dimension, this distance is separating events in order of section is incommensurable with the dimensions of three-dimensional space. The year is incommensurable with St. Petersburg. It is perpendicular to all of the three dimensions. It's not parallel to any of them. Okay, that much we have covered, even if we haven't understood much in terms of getting a new insight, I think. Elsewhere in the same book, Ouspensky describes our time sense, and now this came subjective element. And remember, when we were discussing Einstein, Alam Iqbal made this comment that in Einstein, the subjective element of time goes missing in his theory. So elsewhere in the same book, Ouspensky describes our time sense as a misty space sense. For sure, because even in his actual conceptualization, he is understanding time, even if it is a different dimension, he's still understanding it in the image of space, because distance, after all, is a spatial figure, or so we assume. So Ouspensky describes our time sense as a misty space sense, and argues on the basis of our psychic constitution, the subject that to one, two, or three-dimensional beings, the high dimension must always appear as succession of time. So describe our time sense as a misty space sense, and argues on the basis of our psychic constitution. That's how we are. That's how our consciousness work. That to one, two, or three-dimensional beings, the hand must always appear as succession. Okay, so if you think of some other being which We think of some other being which, so we are beings with three-dimensional sense of space. So time appears to us as the fourth dimension. So it's saying that being with a sense of only one-dimensional space must think of second dimension, for example, as time. And similarly, as being a second dimension, two-dimensional conception of space or understanding of space through psychic constitution must consider the third dimension as time. So this sort of tells us that this understanding of time we have is not objective in the sense that time and space is not objective in the sense that it is constrained by the constitution of our psyche or our subjectivity. Okay. This obviously means that what appears to us as three-dimensional beings as time is in reality imperfectly sense of space dimension. Okay. Not necessarily sense of space dimension. Oh, I guess so. It might be, which in its own nature does not differ from the sense dimension of Euclidean space. Okay, and this obviously correspond with the initial explanation itself, in the sense that time is understood in the image of space, because the basic concept through which we are understanding space and time is the same, distance. So in that sense, they are not incommensurable. And that is seconded by the fact that it might be just our psychic constitution that we see fourth dimension as perpendicular to three dimension, even though these dimensions are all special in their very nature. So in other words, time is not a genuine creative movement, and what we call future events are not fresh happenings, but things already given and located in unknown space. So that brings us back to the same objection which he raised against Einstein. Yet in his search for this fresh direction, other than the three Euclidean dimensions, Ouspensky needs a real serial time, that is, a distance separating events in the order of succession, serial time. Thus, time which was needed and considered viewed as a succession of the purposes of succession for the purpose of one state of argument is quietly divested at a later stage of its serial's character and reduced to what does not differ in anything from other lines and dimension of space. Yeah, so if time is understood entirely on a spatial image, then what Allama Iqbal is saying, it fails to capture the succession element of time. That one event happened after the other or before the other, and the succession can be reversed in a way. And that seems to be the origin of creativity, because if we think of it, if I'm going from E1 to E2, I can go back to E1. But I've gone from T1 to T2, T3, and T4. But T4 is not the same as T1, although in a way, E4 is in a way same as E1. That's what he's saying. So essence of time here seems to be seriality or succession, actual succession. And that seems to be the source of creativity and something incommensurable, which is not captured by spatial imageries, including distance. That's why we need a totally different concept, I guess. Okay, so yeah, and quietly demonstrated later of that serial character. It is because of serial character time that Ouspensky was able to regard it as generally a new dimension. If this character is in reality an illusion, how can it fulfill us with regard to the original dimension? So he takes Ouspensky because he gives him something he thinks which is not present in Einstein conception, that fourth dimension is something perpendicular to. But at the end, it doesn't solve the problem. Okay, I think now we have a bit more handle on Ouspensky and Allama Iqbal's understanding of Ouspensky and why he goes to Ouspensky and why he ultimately rejects him. Okay, we'll stop here, inshallah. We'll continue from here. Subhanakallah wa bihamdika nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. وصلى وسلم على سيدنا ومولانا وحبيبنا وشفينا وطبيب قلوبنا ومأوانا وملجانا ومولانا وسيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه وأزواجه وذريته وإطرته وأوانه وأنصاره وأخوانه الطاهرين الطيبين أجمعين ولعنة